Variables are a major part of any programming language. I can't think of a single programming language I've ever used that didn't use variables in some form. And so let's just talk about some very basic aspects of variables. Now, if you've been around programming a while, you've probably heard all this, but I would suggest you watch anyway, because there could be some things about C++ that might shock you. First of all, let's talk about the best definition of a variable I've ever heard. It is a small piece of memory that you control. Now, you control how it's created, when it's created, you give it a name, and you decide what kind of data is stored in this variable. Now, variables, just because you create it, name it, and decide what to store there, are governed by certain rules in C++ that you will have to abide by. Now, these are going to affect how you name your variable, what characters you use, how it's set up, the structure of the name. Then exactly what kind of data can be stored in that variable, and here we're talking about data types, and we'll do a separate couple of movies on data types a little bit later on. And we also are under the governance of C++ as to where we can use this variable, or from what parts of the program can we access the data that's in this variable, and that is referred to as scope, and we will do a separate video on scope a little bit later on, so you can look forward to that. I know you're excited. Well, let's talk about when we're naming our variables, what's going to be involved here. Well, first of all, when we're creating a variable and we're creating a name for a variable, we can use capital or lowercase letters, A to Z, any alphabet character, but we can't put blank spaces in our variable because it confuses the compiler. It thinks the variable name ended and something else started, and it'll try to use it. Now, we can use numbers in our variable names, but we just can't begin the variable name with a number, all right? So we can't have variables like 7up using the number 7, but we can have, mark 376. That's a valid variable. And we can also use the underscore character. Now, you're going to find that most developers fall into one or two camps: those who hate underscores in a variable name, and those who love them and seem to use them in every single variable, whether they need them or not. And you'll just have to decide what camp you're in there. And then we need to think about, well, how many characters can I use to name a variable? Well, there's some extremes here. One extreme, in Visual C++ 2010, for example, you can use up to, that's not a misprint, 2,048 characters in a single variable name. Now, please don't do this. Don't write novels and call them variables, all right? There's a happy medium somewhere. Many of the C++ compilers out there will only support 31 characters. So if you're going to use this C++ code in different places, don't go past 31 characters. But look, if you can't, name a variable with something meaningful within 31 characters, then you probably talk too much too, and nobody wants to talk to you on the phone and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so kill the drama, kill the over detail here. Try to hold it to just a few characters. Now, avoid naming them too short. If all of your variables are named X, Y, Z, J, K, A, B, R, T, nobody knows what that means. You won't remember what it means. So try to be descriptive. Try to stay under 31 characters, and everybody's going to, well, not everybody's going to be happy, but more people will be happy, all right? Now, here's the thing to watch for. This will get you. Variables in C++ are case sensitive. This is a case sensitive language. So the variable weight with a capital W is not the same variable as weight with all lowercase letters. Be very careful with that. You will introduce some very interesting challenges and errors into your code if you're not aware of case sensitivity. Now, when we're talking about data types, when we create a variable, we declare it to have a certain data type, and this tells the compiler what kind of information I'm going to store in that variable. And that is going to affect the size of the data that's going to be stored in that variable. Because we can give it certain data types and tell it, look, we're just going to store numbers, up to about 127 here. Or we may tell it, we're going to store up to 2 billion in, number values here. And so the compiler will set aside more space for the computer to use for that particular variable. And just like we're packing stuff in our attic, we want to use boxes that fit what we're storing, and we don't want to take a giant refrigerator box and put just a little small shoebox in it. We want to make sure that we utilize our space. And so our data types simply tell the compiler how much memory should be utilized by the variable. And there's going to be some movies out here in the course called data types, and you can go watch those. So there's a lot going on with variables. These are just the basics. You'll see me create a lot of variables in the examples, and we'll talk about some odds and ends about variables as we go through those examples. But I just kind of wanted to give you a good quick foundation here about variables in C++.